Hello, guys, and welcome back to another episode of the ADHD Dads. I'm your host, CJ.
I'm JJ.
And welcome back, Shell Mendelson. Man, you guys may have remembered Shell from a few episodes back. We loved our conversation so much with her that we invited her back. So what's up, Shell? How you been doing?
I've been doing great. Actually, a little bronchitis-y in the last couple of weeks. So I'm just...
Oh, that's all three of us. So.
Yeah.
Well, that's why we missed last week's episode. We're all feeling sick. So if this one sounds like a little bit like we're talking through a tin can or we've halfway turned into frogs, that's why.
Yeah. Can I make a recommendation?
Please.
Mints from Trader Joe's.
Oh, okay.
You know what's so funny, Shell, is I have been showering with a body wash from Trader Joe's that's eucalyptus and all that stuff because I've been feeling sick. So Trader Joe's, if you want to sponsor the show, it sounds like we have a good opportunity.
I'm telling you, I think that Trader Joe's should be sponsoring a lot of the podcasts these days. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so we're all coming out of it. It always goes with a little fever, right? So that's always fun. And the coughing, right? So I may have to mute myself at some point. No, I still have the cough, but everything else is feeling so much better. I can't believe it. Yeah.
We'll all have our fingers over the mute buttons today.
Yeah.
My joke is always that, I buy a pack of boxes of Kleenex from, or facial tissue, I guess we'll go that route, facial tissue from Costco. And then I've got a few boxes. And then I get sick. Before I was sick, I'm like, oh yeah, I've got a lot for a long time. I get sick and then I'm like, oh crap, I got to go buy some more. It's just they're nonstop pulling them out.
I have a ton of them in my bedroom right now, so I get it. Yeah, definitely.
Well, Shell, you've had some exciting news since we last talked to you, right? This is post-book release, so I would love to hear about this.
Wow. Well, so I released a course for ADHD Adults and Teens, Unlock Your Career Path, at the 1st of January. I mean, that is probably maybe the 2nd or 3rd. I don't know, at the beginning of January. And
it's a newborn baby.
It's a newborn baby, and I created it so that it could get in the hands of everybody really, because what's good for people with ADHD is broken down even more and made even simpler for neurodiverse people. But it's very much geared for people with ADHD, and I talk a lot about that and how people with ADHD have been impacted in the workplace over the years, and how we need to really have this process down. And as a career counselor, I can honestly say this is the process that people need to use to get to the next place of really kind of understanding what they want, what they need, how to feel confident. That confidence piece is such a big part of it. And to really be able to identify some areas and fields. So I could go on forever, but I don't know if we're visual for your podcast.
Yes, we are. We do a YouTube element as well. So for those of you who watch on YouTube, yes. Yes, and I love the adult and teen aspect of this too, because I really feel that this could have been really beneficial in my development and thinking where I wanted to go and what path I wanted to bridge out on. And I got to be honest, Shell, since we've talked to you, we've had a number of ADD coaches on the show or autistic coaches on the show. And this seems to be a reoccurring theme within the neurodiverse world of finding attachment to employment or having some sort of kind of existential crisis in your journey of employment. So I'm really curious to kind of pick your brain today to see what kind of questions. Yes, I want to know what kind of questions can we ask ourselves and ask our teens as they're coming into independence and starting a career path.
Yeah, it's also I want to add too. It's a scary place to be sometimes.
Of ADHD coaches and in the hands of every coach, really, because I think when you I'll tell you how easy it is. I want to show you this. I want to show you. Here is an example of how we broke of what each page looks like. Color, simple, pick lots of graphics. Everything is broken down. Lots of I use metaphors as examples, which people with our brains love metaphors. So, and I do too. That's why I kept, as I was working with people over the years, I would keep coming up with these metaphors for some aspect of what I was doing. And I was so fortunate to have this incredible Canva graphics person, and the whole book is done in Canva. And so I asked her if she would help me with designing and formatting everything. And she came up with so many of these graphics. She came up with the format. Kudos to her name's Katrina Burrows, and kudos to her. She's incredible. It could not have turned out as amazing without the help of Katrina. But basically, she has ADHD as well. So she's a teacher, right? Her background is in teaching. She's also talented. She's multi-talented, as many of us are. And so just based on that alone, I wanted to take one of her talents and things that she enjoyed doing to help me with this. And through the years, she would come up with these metaphors. As soon as I would think of it, she would create an image for me. And then I was able to use that with my clients over the years. And this is a compilation with some additions, of course, and exercises and things of everything that I've done. And I currently do the Your Next Career Move Masterclass, which is an 8-week class that this book is based on and goes through almost to the T. And so everybody who takes the class has the book and we go through it. But of course, it's a much deeper dive for people who really want to get into it. But so I thought my thinking in this was everybody needs to have a process that they can go through. Everybody needs it. And for years, I was too shy to admit that because I thought, oh, you're bragging because you've been doing this for a while and blah, blah, blah. But the truth is, I know that this is something that literally everybody globally needs. And so with ADHD, it's even more imperative because as we talked about earlier, if you don't love what you're doing or have some real connection with it in a big way on a daily basis, where most of what you're doing are using the skills and doing the activities and tasks that you are not only comfortable with, but excited about in some way, energized about in some way, that eventually it's going to break down. So a lot of what you hear from people out there in the neurodiverse or neuro atypical, in our tribe, within our tribe of ADHD and autistic and Asperger's and all that, those brain wiring area, people who have issues with those or challenges, you're going to get you're going to hear some of the things that you've been hearing in the workplace if this process is not done. So until you've gone through something like that, and really the bottom line question is, what do I want to do? What do I want to do? What is it what is important to me? Right. And also it has to be about me, not about the employer, right? Not about how do I get a job? How do I blah, blah, blah. This has to come first because all of that will fall into place for the person who's very clear and focused on what they want to do. And this is the first step, is answering these questions, prioritizing the answers to those questions so that you come up with a roadmap, which I call the career galaxy. So everything is in planets now for people. So this is the roadmap that is completed, and it's actually part of the book. There is a fold out at the end of the book. Let me show you. I've had kind of an issue with the printer where some of them have been left out, but they get them out right away when that happens. So if anyone gets this book and finds that this fold out is not at the end of the book, all you have to do is write me and we'll get it to you ASAP. So it comes with the book. And so all the answers can go on here, and then you have your whole picture, right? Of what your life, the areas that are so important when it comes to determining a career path for the future, right? And you're able to prioritize each one of them here. And when you see it, it hopefully looks like home. It looks like this is where I'm supposed to be. This is who I am. This makes sense for me, right? And then you can now articulate that to an employer. You can speak of it. You can actually have the words to describe and know the field uh, or foundation and or special knowledge. There's different words that we use for that help lay the foundation for that. Sorry, my eyes are. Do you get the eye burn thing with the I don't know. I get that.
Well, no, this sounds like a great alternative to like, you know, a refreshing alternative to like what we did in school, those like standardized tests of generic questions, and then you answer it and it says, you know, you're supposed to be a janitor or, you know, a cop or whatever, you know, like this seems of like a very curious, inquisitive approach to like finding out what's important to you and how to utilize that in the workplace. Because, you know, that's something I really love to hear you say too, that this can help us like figure out what questions to ask about a career path and about, you know, in an interview setting, you know, and where I remember when I was first, you know, transitioning into a young adulthood looking for a way to support myself, you know, out here in California, you go into these new work opportunities, things that you're unfamiliar with, things that you're unsure. Do I even want to be a part of this company? What does sales look like? What does this, you know, this type of work look like? And then you get into this interview and then you're like, I don't know if this is for me, or I don't know if I want this, but you feel in this power dynamic position of like, well, I need this job. I need to look good. So I'll say whatever it is that I think that they want to hear to get this position, where I think we need to take a more proactive approach to our own selves and what we want out of life and what we can bring to the table and what the job can bring to us. So often we're like, I need the job, where I think we need to change a mentality into like, you know, I need a job that suits me, not just I need a job, but I need the job. And how do we figure out what the job is?
Yeah, and when you complete this process, you're no longer what I call a job beggar, which is what you just described. Uh, you want to be more the job developer, the person who's developing something for themselves by going to the interview and asking the right questions. Number one, and making sure that whatever comes out of this, it's going to match up as best as possible with that roadmap, with that career galaxy, right? And if it doesn't, if you hear it, you'll know it when you hear it, and you can see it on their faces when you ask questions. And you say, for example, this is a question I love for people to ask. Everyone should always ask this question before they even get started, honestly. Is the job that I'm interviewing for today the job I will be starting with on day one? In other words, some employers will bait and switch you, and they will put you into like a 6 months over here. We're going to try you out over here before we actually move you into this other thing. People listening to this who've had this happen to them, I always see a bunch of head bobbings happen. And it's very frustrating. And it could be the kiss of death for a person with ADHD. Because what if it's something that is completely off track, off anything that they thought they were signing up for? And it's in fact on the negative end of things. So I tell people, if they not roll their eyes, if they hesitate, or you can tell if they're kind of hedging, you can ask them further about that. And if it still you don't feel comfortable, you need to be able to say, if it's not a good match, I'm sorry, this doesn't look like a good fit, and get up and walk away. Or else you're going to go through the same dynamic And people who've had that dynamic occur year after year after year. And these are the people I work with, by the way. They all come to me because they've been through this for years, or they don't want to start out that way. And I have parents who contact me, parents of adult children, of adults who come to me and are willing to invest in their kids because they see this happening and they want to help them in some, however they can, in whatever way they can. So understanding all this is so freaking important before you even get into the interview, or pick the person that you're interviewing with, pick the company that you're interviewing with, or the situation. It could be a startup or even one other person who you're working with alongside of, or whatever. But it's really important to know what you want and know what is important to you in every element. And those elements are the skills you want to be using. That's such a big piece of it. I mean, I could go on and on, but the people that you want to be, the characteristics of those people, without naming specific people, what are those characteristics? People who are or tend to be, those kinds of characteristics. The working conditions are such a big piece of it. Like, what are those conditions? And one of the things I do with people is they create what's called the self accommodation plan. And so you've heard of the accommodation plan with the ADA, which Americans for Disabilities Act created, which a lot of employers, it's called reasonable accommodation. Well, this is not that. This is more you knowing exactly in detail what the conditions need to be for you to thrive. And that is the best talking point of all in an interview. Because when you're able to express that and say, under these conditions in which I'm able to, or however you put it, you can be discerning about how you state that. I will thrive. I will be as productive, if not more, than every other employee. I will be on task. I can get produce, blah, blah, blah. I mean, you can go to town with that once you know what it is. And you're able to, then you can actually have this conversation that very few employers get to hear, by the way. They don't get to hear from you what is important to you to do the best job possible for them, right? Of course, it has to be kind of about them, but they also need to know that they're also giving you what you need, and that should be an employer that you want to work with. And the ones that don't care are obviously the ones you don't want to work with, and you can see that as you're in the interview. You can see it. You can see it on their faces, read the room kind of thing.
I think that's really important too for like neurodiversity to really consider their strengths too and where they excel. Because, we've had a lot of interviews too, and I've read a lot of things about, the potential of letting your employer know that you have a neurodiverse issue, whether it be autism or ADD or Asperger's or whatever your thing is, could hinder a potential position. I have ADD. So employers think, well, he gets off track. He can't concentrate. He's distracted easily, but if we can have the wherewithal to say, I have ADD and this is why I excel in this area when I have this kind of environment and these tools around me, can be really empowering to say like, look, I got a quote unquote superpower here, with the right set of circumstances, and it's not just a write-off, but it can be let's tap into that with the right employer and the right mindset. So I really love that aspect of not hide. Excuse me. Here comes the the cold again.
Yeah.
I really love that aspect of being forthcoming and honest and knowing what those strengths and potential weaknesses are and being able to communicate that rather than just trying to like hide your parts of yourself.
Are you open to me shifting that conversation a little bit?
Please.
Yeah. So I do not recommend telling people off the bat that you have that diagnosis. That's why because it can be misinterpreted even by the best of them. And people who don't understand, who are neurotypical are not truly conscious. And you know that with ADHD, it's kind of like going to a grief counselor with somebody who's never lost anyone. You know, if you're talking to somebody who's not doesn't have the brain wiring, doesn't know what goes on, you hear all these things like, "Oh, I get distracted easily." You know, they have the stereotypical view of what ADHD people uh, what their characteristics are and what they can expect, and it's often wrong. It often is absolutely 100% wrong. And so, with that kind of prejudice, so to speak, it can cause more problems than help. So that's why really knowing by creating like a self accommodation plan for yourself absolutely is a way to be able to have a very on point conversation that doesn't necessarily require you to reveal that. I don't think there's any requirement that you reveal that. And if it means a tax benefit to them, that shouldn't even be the issue when they're hiring anyway. You know, you don't want them to hire you for that. No, I mean, I'm not trying to dismiss what you're saying. I'm just saying that there's a much more empowering way of handling that really puts the ball more in your court. Where when you're telling them this is under these circumstances, you're going to get the best of the best. Now, wouldn't you want to give those circumstances to the person that understands that?
Totally,
Because
yeah.
because even if you're neurotypical and you go in and you don't quite know what you want, there could be things that happen in the environment that are so antithetical to what the way they work and what's important to them that they could screw up too. I mean, it really doesn't matter whether either way is, but knowing what you want and being able to articulate that piece of it is what puts you in the driver's seat
Mm.
and really takes you out of the typical person coming in or the job beggar. It separates you from the job beggar, and that makes you stand out, and that gives you much greater opportunity to come into a situation that's going to match what your needs are in the work environment, physically. And when I say physical, I mean literally every physical aspect of your environment. Many people do not thrive working in those little cubby space, those small, what do you call them? Cubicle spaces. The word cubicle always, I can't even say it half the time because I have such trauma around that from when I was younger. Working in those kinds of, some people like it because it gives a little bit of a division, but there's no, for me, I need privacy, right? So knowing that you need to have the private space, you need to be able to move around a little bit, you need to have flexibility, get up and walk around. You don't want to be tracked everywhere you go, right? uh let's see.
I wanted to point out
Yay.
one thing about it. You know, like
Sorry.
a lot of companies, you know, are they say they're invested in their people, so they have the personality test, you know, like a Myers Briggs, and what you were talking about made me think of that. Like this
Yeah,
person's an ENFP, so therefore they prefer this working environment. This one's an INFJ, they prefer this working environment. And I don't think they then say this person's ADHD, so then they need to be in this type of environment. Rather,
yeah,
it's more about the personality, because ADHD doesn't mean now every person fits
yeah.
within this bucket.
It's individualized. We're as individualized as the next person. We may have similar characteristics or similar things that really define the ADHD aspect of it, but it's not for every single person in every environment. It's very individual. And I work with individuals with ADHD. So, I mean, I've heard it all. And I do this really great exercise with them where they're able to say all the conditions they hate first, and then transfer that over into the other side. What would the other side of that look like for you? So you get a better sense of what is important to you. You've got to really, and the biggest piece for people, and this is the part where I say if you're going to use a book, and so I wrote the book for people who can't afford the class too. so that they can have something to get started with. But you always need accountability. So you need to be working regularly with ADHD with somebody else if you're going to do that. Okay. And have scheduled times to do it. But you really need to be able to sit down, do these exercises, and get a sense of what is important to you, and then prioritize them. And it gives you the tools. All the tools are there to do it. That's what I love. So every person needs to have it at least in their hands. I think psychologists, therapists, psychiatrists, anybody in the helping field of any kind really needs to have it available, so you can at least understand when you look through it that there is a process to go through if you have questions and you're uncertain and you're unclear and you just don't know. You love the first thing I hear from people is, I have so many ideas, right? You hear that one a lot. I've got so many ideas. I just can't. Well, have you picked one? Generally, no. Which one do I start out with? I have no clue. Well, that's because you need to define all the different elements first, and then it will be clear which is the first thing that you need to get started with. And I call it the next move, because it's not necessarily the whole path. It's just, what is the next best move? And then the path unfolds, right? I want to show you one image. I know I probably got off topic. Sorry about that.
That's what we do.
I know.
That makes it brilliant here.
That's one of my ADHD characteristics. What did I say? What did you ask? I have no idea.
Well, I do have a question for you after you show this, because what you said sparked a specific example from my life that I'd like to dive into for people who feel lost. But yeah, I'd love to see what you have here first.
So this is the image that I came up with that really is the image. Like, what is your tree trunk? Okay, your tree trunk is the foundation. That's the part that sits on the land or wherever gets the roots go in and really solidifies the rest of it, right? So food, I always call it the food tree because I use the food industry. When you think about, if you have one word, it's always one, no more than two words. And it's very broad, right? So when you think about food, look at all the different things. These are the branches of the tree, right? These are just a few of them. So how many people that are miserable in their jobs, but they're always cooking, they're always like involved in growing food, creating recipes, like they're food fanatics. You ever met people like that? Right.
Yeah, I'm one of them.
That's me. I got a cooking channel. My kids got a cooking channel.
Yeah. Yeah, well, see, you're doing something you're at least involved in it. So this is like the way to get started with that is like you determine, and that's part of what we do, is try and identify what this is down here first. And when you identify this, the rest will follow. And it doesn't all have to be filled out at once. It's like, what's the first one, right? What do I need to do to get to that first branch? And it could be training, going back to school, doing internships, getting certifications. There's so many different ways to get that started, or just using whatever skills you have and moving into using that skill to do work within that field, which may seem, like the antithesis of what we're talking about, but really it's about going into the industry that you're excited about. So now you get to be around those people in that environment. And even though the work may be not the fun work to start out with, you're still in that environment and you have more access to really moving into that next place. So that's the kind of work that we do. That's so important to break down for people, especially with ADHD, because if we don't have a clue how to do that, we are going to be forever grasping at those shiny objects, the course here, and spending thousands and thousands of dollars. I mean, it starts with teenagers, right? I want to go to this school. My son wanted to go to, he had to go to a university. That was such a big thing because that's the way they thought, coming from, the town we were in and the environment he was in. It was like, I can't just go to a community college or a state. And as a mom, he was 18 when he got to choose, so I couldn't actually do that, but I tried to influence him with ADHD to start out in a community college where he could get his core classes done. And he was also an introvert and inattentive, right? And I knew that a university environment would be overwhelming, but he insisted on the university, and he got overwhelmed in his first year. He excelled in high school. He was like one of the top students. He got into an engineering program as a freshman, and he was completely overwhelmed, and he dropped out the first year. So, and there was nothing I could do about it. I tried, and I wish I had been. Now, when I look back on it, I was undiagnosed at the time, and I wish I was more forceful about it in terms of you can't force him, but I would have spoken about it more to him. It's just school. You can spend so much money on these classes, signing up for college for years and not knowing the direction you're going to take. And even the first 2 years, like if you're just, I say start out, it's at least less expensive in a 2-year college. And if you're, until you know for sure what you want to do, you at least have those 2 years to pick a major, right? And at least go through this process in your first 2 years, if not in high school, before you even make the decision, because college isn't for everyone. Everyone knows that. Colleges nowadays are different than they used to be. Certainly when I was going to school, back in the days when dinosaurs roamed the earth, it was different. Okay. It didn't cost hardly anything back then. I went to a state college. I went to San Francisco State University, and it was so cheap. It was so cheap. I mean, I took out a loan only because I didn't want to live like a college student as when I became a graduate student. I wanted to live decently and not, live in a dorm or anything like that. And nowadays it's different. Nowadays, you know how it is. It's outrageous. And
Yeah, my college cost $83,000 to go to, and the median income for my career path was 50 to 60 grand. So
people don't even think of that. They don't even think ahead of time. If you go through this kind of a process, that's all information that you have up front. Like, if I go for this, here's how much the school's going to cost, and here's how much I'm going to come out with, and I'm going to start owing a lot of money within 6 months. I'm going to have to start paying that thing off. Right. And they're businesses now, and they pay more to the executives than they do to the faculty. So why wouldn't the money be invested in faculty? Well, it's a business, so they love it if you don't switch majors. I hope there are no college executives, university executives listening to this. Only those who want to leave their positions. Yeah, so they love it when you switch majors, because they'll keep you in for another year. Switch as many times as you want. And in the meantime, their career centers lack this kind of information. They send you to a computer and have you take the assessments, like the Myers-Briggs, which I don't love, by the way. I used to give it all the time. Don't love it. Means there's only 16 boxes you can fit into. Doesn't that sound a little strange for people with ADHD? I mean, I took it, and then 6 months later, my type changed. So what does that tell you, right? It has nothing to do with who you are, and it doesn't give you any real information that's going to help you transition, make really solid decisions for yourself. Great for team building, if you're working on a project, or something like that. You have a sense of kind of where people might fit in on getting the project done. But when it comes to making career decisions, no, I don't love it. I don't like assessments. I've always been kind of anti-assessment. And people who are out there who give the strengths finders and things like that aren't going to like what I say. But when you mention strengths, that's another thing. We don't focus on strengths, and here's why. when a strength, we all have strengths, but if an employer knows that you have a strength in something, it doesn't mean that you love using that thing, that you actually want to use that in your work. But when they get wind of it and they see it, they could stick you into that position, doing that thing that you don't want to be doing, right? But so we focus on skills, not strengths. And the skills are more transferable skills that you love using. So that's a little bit different than focusing on the strengths. And you have much more ability to be flexible with all of that and to really understand that if the work that you're doing doesn't include those skills, the top ones that you've prioritized, it's a no-go. It's a simple sift and sort. No, yes, no, yes, no. So there you have it.
All right. So my question, I think, is you're gonna have so many answers for this, but my story is very much one of feeling lost for a long time, and it started with, I was maybe a little different as a kid in grade school, and kids made fun of me. I went to a psychologist for a while to kind of work through some of those things that I was struggling with, my personal identity, my self-esteem issues. Well, then we get to the point where I am, in high school, and I went to a very small high school. So my classes were all just the basic, science and math and stuff like that. So I wasn't really exposed to a lot of things that I might be interested in, but I was very creative and I loved to write, which, funny side note to that, every year I bugged my high school teacher, my English high school teacher, when are we going to start doing more creative writing? And she said next year. And then the next year came and went. And I said, so when are we going to start doing that? She started to get really annoyed with me. But I only wrote one creative story throughout my whole high school career, which was such a bummer to me because I love my creative side. And that was what I really sought after, in high school, was being able to do more of that. Art, I was independently studying for some time in my later grades in high school. But that psychology, visiting with the psychologist, always stuck out to me. So then I got to meet with the school counselor, which every kid did. And she was essentially going to have a conversation about what your path might look like. And I told her, I said, well, I went to a psychologist and I was kind of interested in that. And she opened up this book of like all the careers that you could possibly have. And she pointed to psychologist, read the description and closed the book, and then basically sent me on my way, which showed no curiosity about the person I am and the passions that I might have. And then I was asking, talking to my parents, what do I do after high school? And they said, well, you got to figure something out. Basically said, go to college. But there was no curiosity. There was no, let's try and understand you so then you can find a path.
Right? What do you want? Yeah.
Right. So here I took a double major. I was creative writing and psychology. And it was great. I had that control, you could say, but there was still kind of that wonder about the whole world. And in the meantime, sounds a little ignorant, but as a kid who was creative and drawing and stuff, I remember telling myself something that wasn't true. I can't really use this in a career path. But of course, if you just look out in the world, advertising, product design, and all that stuff, that wasn't actually brought to my attention in my little young ignorant self. About, with the people that I was surrounded with, that essentially were supposed to provide some form of direction. And direction, I think, usually comes in the form of questions and understanding. So here I got to the point of graduating bachelor's, and I had a psychology degree, which basically doesn't do anything unless you continue, or I had creative writing. And, I could write beautiful stuff, but hey, that doesn't mean I'm going to actually make any money off of that. So then I went to a master's level and I studied on technical communication, which kind of bridges the gap from writing and career path, I thought. And the beautiful part about that point in my life was my professors and my advisors, they really started to ask questions about me. And that helped me kind of gain the confidence I needed in the passions that I had. So once I graduated with my tech comm degree, I started a career in that, but then I still kind of went back to, I was really given a lot of understanding and praise for the creative side of me. So then I studied on my own to now be what I am today, which is a web designer and developer using my technical expertise and my creative expertise. But it took a lot longer of a journey to get there. And I guess that's what I think I find really interesting about your book. That kid who's in high school, who doesn't have the support system he needs, or she needs. What does that look like? How do we make that support system available? That's kind of my question to you, is with this book, with the tree,
with this book, hopefully. I had, so when you told your story about the school counselor, oh my God, horrible flashbacks to high school. I had Mr. Wallace, who told me, I told him I wanted to go to the University of California where I knew my brother was going to go there. And he looked at me and he goes, you need math and science, but you could always take typing. And at that time it was shorthand. That's where he told me to go.
How many women were told that typing is a career?
I have visions of just water ballooning his office or whatever, from all of that. It was one of those traumatic things for me to be told that that's what I was supposed to do. And sorry, you can't do anything that you want to do or anything that you're even thinking about. I know I needed, just to get into the university, I had to get more science. I had to up my grades in that and the typical science and math. But instead of saying, hey, we can get you a tutor, or why don't you take additional classes or give me some path to getting that done, he didn't even go that far. It was like, no, we're not going to even try with you. That was the attitude, yes, towards girls at that time. And I think there's still a lot of that going on. I don't think that's totally changed. I don't think it's that dramatic, but, and I had, I grew up with people that didn't believe in me, actually. A stepfather who was a doctor who walked away from me when I asked him to help me with biology homework, and he sat down, and because I didn't get it right away, he just got up and walked away. That was the kind of upbringing I had from, people who didn't believe in me. And years later, he and my mom divorced. And years later, my brother went to visit him. And when he told him that I was doing
did Shell freeze on us?
In my work, and I had a master's degree, and he goes, really? That with that kind of look, really? Yeah. So that was what I got to grow up with. I mean, I like to say I do what I do despite my upbringing, despite the lack of support that I got as a kid. So parents, whenever parents contact me, it's like I'm like, you're beautiful for wanting to help your adult child in that way. You're just, I honor you, honestly.
Can I tell you guys a quick story too, since we're on this topic? When I was in junior high, I used to write creative stories too, and I was really into horror stuff as a kid. I always collected the monster toys, the alien stuff, like the creepiest, weirdest looking stuff I was into. Scary stories to tell in the dark. That was my jam. I loved that book. And I started writing these creative stories. And they would have my friends. This was around junior high year. So I was writing these scary stories. And I used all of my friends' names as the characters. And I would show it around, at recess and at lunchtime and stuff. And my friends really loved this because, to be honest, it was a little adult themed, because I was into horror. So there was, was probably some violent, gruesome stuff in there that was middle school kids ate up. They're like, what? He says that? He's writing this, And
were you a zombie kid?
Yeah, I was. Yeah. Zombies, aliens, monsters, any ghosts, any of that stuff, and there was adult themes in that, and teachers picked this up. And they said, what the is this kid writing? This is inappropriate. This cannot be. He's using what kind of language? He's talking about what kind of scenes and details, and it's all of his friends' names. Oh, we have to put a stop to this. And I remember going through this period of being in trouble, for a long time. And got sent up to the principal's office because one of these copies of these creative stories was going around school and teachers got wind of it. And I was making a killing off this. I was profiting off this. I was selling these things for $10 a pop, and kids were eating it up. They were bringing cash in. I was making a side hustle out of this, so... And it got up to the principal's office, and the principal was the one that said, there's something here.
Uh-oh, he went on
No,
mute.
I hit the mute button. I hit something
Okay.
on my keypad getting too animated.
Uh,
But the principal said, there's something here. It's this, though maybe we need to maybe reel in the language or adult themes that he's putting in this kid is talented, and wow,
oh,
like
goodness.
what a great thing. And we had talks about that, and he ended up putting me on the school paper, as a way to like explore this part of me. So I started writing for the school paper, and doing that after school as an extracurricular activity. Now, mind you, I was still kind of like throwing little hidden adult themes in there because that was like my sixth sense of humor.
Yeah.
I had this social studies teacher. His name was Richard Little, and all of the adult peers called him Dick. And so whenever I would write his name in the paper, I would write little comma Dick. And I got away with it for years, but that was like my little nod to him, like, hey, I don't like you, guy, So I still had a little bit of that, like, anarchist in me as I was doing that. But that was really an important time in my life where I wasn't just written off as a troublesome kid or a high energy kid or someone that was trying to cause drama, conflict, or trouble. It was someone believed in me and said, no, wow, there's something here that we need to explore and incentivize and really celebrate. And I really remember that, I don't remember that principal's name, but I do remember just that feeling of, let's dig into this rather than punish for that.
Yeah, I mean, I love that because I doubt Stephen King started off by writing hymns for the hymnal book at church, right? There was something he was exploring. My kid, when you said that, Colton, I thought about he loves insects and weird things, and they make plush trilobites now and isopods, and this kid's just he's loving it, and being able to identify that there's strengths in that, or we'll call passions or whatever, the idea that somebody has a strong interest in something at a young age, they're working their way through it, they're workshopping this brilliant mind and this passion that they have. And if we hinder that because we're afraid of it, we're going to prevent them from really flourishing as they develop that. And that's kind of what I really appreciate about that story, Colton, is somebody said there's a flourishing part of this kid's writing that he's still identifying through the process of maybe being a little vulgar or whatever. You are finding your path, and as soon as we say no, there's no good to this, we're missing the character within because we are afraid of it.
Exactly. Well said.
And one thing that I really has really resonated with me, Shell, that you've been talking about here is, I think so many of us with a neurodiversity, we get caught in that loop of like, I don't like this. This doesn't make me feel good. I don't excel here. This makes me uncomfortable. So I'm going to avoid that. I'm going to stay away from that. That's a trigger. Don't do that. Where what I like about what you've saying about your process is that there's a step after that, that a lot of us with neurodiversity don't realize. Yeah. And that's like, what does make me feel good? What does bring me alive? Like, what does interest me and keep me motivated and attached to this thing? And then not only that, there's another step of that further. And that's, well, how do we get there? What are the steps that we need to think about of going forward, and the questions that we need to ask on what structure needs to be in place so that we can do that, and I think a lot of us just get so overwhelmed with the negative stimuli that we're taking in and the uncomfortability of our condition that we get trapped in that, and we don't have a way of looking forward to progress and structuring it for ourselves. So I've really enjoyed how this book that you've created here is really helping us decide what that is and internalize that and really like attach to that.
Yes. It's for parents too. What you said is absolutely 100% true. And one of the pieces of the process, rather, I'll say it's in the book, but the process itself in the book includes doing what we call, and what you're familiar with this term, informational interviewing. But it's after you have really done enough research and gotten clarity on some of the areas that people are doing out there in real life that you're curious about and you want to know more about. And that's where people shift right there. It's having those conversations. And that's the piece that's missing for a lot of people. They don't do them before they make these critical, huge decisions that are going to cost them a fortune, put them in debt, take them in the wrong direction. They've got to be having these conversations before they make those decisions. And that is the turning point. That's how you figure out what the next, if something they're saying resonates with you and you're like, this is exciting. I didn't even know this existed or this was possible, but yet here are people out there doing this thing that I never thought I could ever do, right? And these are the steps that I need to take to get there. And it's not always about going to school. It's not always about the university route. That is not always necessary to do. What's important is to do the route that's going to get you into the field and to get you started on the path. And at some point, you may go back if it requires you to. I'm a firm believer that you should not sign up for any kind of educational, no matter what it looks like, educational institution or course or college, whatever, until you know what path you're going to take or have a pretty good idea of what that is. Because nowadays people cannot afford to get in that kind of debt anymore. It just can't happen. You just said that you owe more, you paid more for your education than what your occupation actually paid. That is so significant for people to hear that if you had maybe taken a little bit different route, maybe you didn't have to do this really expensive education. Maybe there was some alternative way to get there, to start out, or some things that you could have done along the way to get you there and then go back and get that. Now, I have people who I work with who decide, yeah, I want to be a therapist or I want to be a coach. A lot of people go into coaching because they realize that they can be a lot more flexible with that and still help people, because helping people is a big one. We tend to be mission oriented with ADHD, right? We tend to be purpose oriented, not mission. I'll say purpose.
And what an important book, not just for neurodiversity. Like, how many men and women out there have chosen a career path that they aren't really attached to or have no passion to, because that was told to them, this is the path, this is the way. So I gosh, this feels like an important book, not just for people with neurodiversity, but for really anybody that's looking to start this independent journey into jobhood, into their careers.
I like to think of it as a disruptor in terms of how people think about choosing a career direction. Because we have been, I believe we've been propagandized from birth, how these things are done and how they're supposed to be and what's okay and what's not okay, without exploring that very thing that you were so lucky, CJ, to have gotten happen to you and to have been recognized at the right time for you. But it should have happened a lot earlier. You shouldn't have had to go through that whole thing of being sent up to the office or being dissed for all your crazy writing. It wasn't crazy, but it's who you are. It's on some level, it is like your soul, right? It's like taking your soul and saying, sorry, your soul's not right. Where your soul is leading you is not correct. And instead of other people taking up the mantle for you and saying, this is important, this is an interest, where is it leading? How do we encourage more in the way of allowing you to really express fully who you are? And that's what I hope to break that cycle. That's what I hope this book helps to do, is to break that cycle a little bit. I think that's really important. Yeah. That was such a great story. I love it, because I thought immediately of my grandson, who's all about zombies and all about everything is death. Everything is like, you name it, it's dark, right?
Listen, I can understand the concern. It was a serial killer book, so my friends were getting chopped up and stabbed, and I'm sure it was very concerning to some adults, in the 90s.
Yeah, but back then, I mean, even then, if you weren't killing things yourself, like killing animals or something, then I would be concerned, right? If you were physically doing any of that, but it's just your imagination coming to life in some way, or death, however you
And
want
that's
to
the
put it.
thing. Like, who
Yeah.
who is the authority to say when writing about this stuff for publication is appropriate and when it's not appropriate? I mean,
Yeah,
the
exactly.
truth is we do not have the same exact timeline in terms of our maturity or development in any given area as the next person. So
Exactly.
exploring that that's the big part of that takeaway that I got, is that, Colton, yeah, you wrote stuff
Yeah.
that some people are like, I don't know if I can handle that. Well, not everybody goes to see a horror movie in the theater, right?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. I just love that story. That's such a great story. I'm thinking now I want to talk to Jacoby, my grandson.
Yeah, I
I want to
still
have a
have
conversation.
friends from middle school too. When I talk to them or run into them, they go, "God, do you remember that book you wrote, Do or Die?" That was the name of it. I still remember it. You know.
That's a great title.
Yeah, it was like you would get a phone call from the serial killer, and he said, "You got to do this, or else you'll die."
You know what? I use that term a lot in the work I do in terms of people who are, that's kind of where I want people to think where their energy needs to go when it comes to like doing what they need to do to thrive in the work and on the path. It has to be kind of a do or die situation, right? Which means that, yeah, I didn't want to have to go back to school, get this master's degree, because I was already like 29 at that point. And I thought I was old. And like, I'm going back to school and I don't really want to have to do this thing. But in order for me to work in the field I wanted to work in, I had to do it. And so I went through hell in the next couple of years trying to get through it. It was really hard for me on a lot of levels, but I did it, and the only reason I stuck to it was it became a do or die. Like, I got to do it if I want to do what I want to do. I got to do it.
Maybe that'll be the name of this episode. We'll change the names.
Do or die. Yeah, I like that. I actually like that. Yeah.
Well, Shell, I have really thoroughly enjoyed this conversation. I love our talks together. I love what you're doing, what you're putting out in the world, how you're helping people. I think this is so important. This is such a tool that's needed. And yes, what a great disruptor this is to the propaganda that we've been like brainwashed into thinking. Because I was really refreshed to hear that, because just before you hopped on, JJ and I were talking about how I've been struggling over the last couple of weeks in my role as a stay-at-home dad. My wife has really started this new position. She's been working a lot of hours, and I've been just like dad mode, just home dad mode, home dad mode, home dad mode. And whenever I get into questioning my why or my passion of that, it's never because of how I'm feeling internally. It's because of the external putting that like propaganda expectations on me of, you're a man, you should be out there, you're the provider, that's what your role is. It's not the nurturer, it's not the maternal, parent at home, cooking, cleaning, and nurturing, and it's such
Yeah, that's
bullshit.
so
It's
old.
such a
That's so
it's
old.
such a
Yeah.
it's such a yes, it's such a bullshit story that I allow in from the external world, So
Yeah.
honestly, it was kind of kismet today to just hear you pull that back in and remind me of like what is important to me and what my strengths are as an individual, as a parent, as a man, so I really got a lot out of today. So, thank you not only to the neurodiverse community, but for myself personally. So thank you, thank you, thank you.
Oh gosh, oh wow, that's so good to hear. It really is. Yeah, I mean, I could only imagine having my dad want to be home. That's just not even in the realm of my thinking. So, I mean, the fact that you want to be there, it's something you want to do, and you're using the skills you love, you're in the environment you love, you're doing what you're supposed to be doing. That's so awesome to hear, Colton, really. I mean, I'm impressed. Super. Your kids are very lucky.
Well, you impress me as well. And where can people find this book? Please, I know you've given it on the last episode, but let's revisit it again. Where can people find you and find this book and be more engaged in the things that you're doing and putting out there?
Well, number one, it's on Amazon. But I actually prefer people go to my website so they actually get to know me a little bit, which is careercoachingwithshell.com. Or an easier one is passion2career, career.com. And you'll see, you just click on course book, and then you get to see more of, it's my authors page, and there's more there than the information on Amazon. The one on Amazon does give you some pictures of the inside of it, which is nice, but either one works. So those are the two places. It's with a potential distributor right now as we speak. And so it may be available on a lot more platforms going forward. But right now, Amazon works. So does my website.
And then the next step is we're going to turn this into a curriculum book. We're going to put it into schools, and we're going to have a whole course load on how to teach kids what they want out of life and how to get it. Because that is what we need to be doing for kids, honestly.
Yes. I want it to be taught, okay? I really do want it to be taught. And I don't want to leave, if I can, without saying a word about Richard Bolles, who wrote What Color is Your Parachute, who was my mentor, and from which this book was inspired. And that was a work that I did for so many years before it transformed into this really different kind of, it's different from that, but the process is pretty much the same. It's in a different order. There's more to it. There are more exercises. It's more focused for people with ADHD. But in doing that, it's also clearer cut. It makes it much easier. I just wanted to make it easier. And I do agree with you. I want it in the hands of educators, parents, every nonprofit on the planet, all the employment development places, the VA. I would love to see it in the VA somehow. Up for everybody to help them move forward with this. Think about how many military people with ADHD there are.
Yeah, no kidding. Yeah. Well, I'm going to include all of this in the schno notes for our listeners.
We have a new term, schnotes.
Schnotes. Show notes. I love it. The schnotes.
The schnotes. So it will be in the schnotes for you guys. So make sure to take a look at that. But thank you, Shell, for dedicating your time and for sharing your wonderful knowledge and experience on this. It's been great. So thank you guys to our listeners too for listening to this. I'm your host, CJ.
I'm JJ.
And give us an outro, Shell. Say, this is the ADHD Dads.
This is the ADHD Dads. Yay!
Thank you guys. Until next time.